Welcome to Literary Lights 2026, our annual year-long series illuminating new books by Armenian writers in English. I'm Olivia Katranjian, the founder of the International Armenian Literary Alliance, and I'm so proud to present this series with our partners, Nasser and the Zorab Center. Today, we're here to talk about Fearcatcher, the debut novel of Naira Kuzmich. Naira was born in Armenia and raised in Los Angeles. Her fiction and nonfiction have appeared in West Branch, Blackbird, Ecotone, the O. Henry Prize Stories 2015, the Threepenny Review, the Massachusetts Review, the Cincinnati Review, and elsewhere. She passed away in 2017 from lung cancer at the age of 29. She's the author of the short story collection In Everything I See Your Hand, centered on Armenian immigrants in the Los Angeles enclave of Little Armenia. I had the honor of reviewing Naira's collection for Wasafiri magazine and wrote that each story, sparsely written but bursting with intensity, captures a simultaneous expression of grief and love. Naira had a startling capacity to paint a picture of nuanced characters with specific, singular details. In one story, she writes, "My mother never hit me after we came to America. In Los Angeles, you could kill a man and get away with it, but you could not touch your children." She wrote about women and motherhood, and in an essay titled On Grief, she wrote, "When I write, I am singing my Armenian womanhood to whoever might listen. I am dancing a dance about losses I am only just beginning to understand. I am trying to carve out a space where the ghosts of my family's past can breathe again, and maybe even speak." I would have loved to have gotten to know Naira, to welcome her into our Armenian literary community. What we can do is celebrate her work, and today we welcome three writers and editors to discuss her debut novel, Fearcatcher, a coming-of-age story set in a small village in Soviet Armenia. The story follows Ruzan, a girl raised by a mystical figure known as a fearcatcher. You can purchase the books through yalasbookshop.org storefront, or in person and online through Nasser's bookstore. I hope that you do. Without further ado, I will introduce our today's speakers. Vedran Husic was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina and raised in Germany and the United States. His debut short story collection, Basements and Other Museums, was a semifinalist for the 2019 Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize. He's the recipient of 2 fiction fellowships from Provincetown's Fine Arts Works Center and a fiction fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. His short stories and poems have been published in places such as North American Review, Image, Blackbird, Ecotone, and Electric Literature's Recommended Reading, among others. Excerpts from his recently completed memoir, For Those Truly Living, which deals with his fiancée Naira's struggle with cancer, their life before and during her illness, and a year of his life following her death, have appeared in the Cincinnati Review, Copper Nickel, and Agni. He currently teaches at St. Leo University, where he is on faculty for the Low Residency MA in Creative Writing, and lives in Tampa, Florida with his wife, the writer Anne Barngrover. Adam Mirzoyan is a writer, editor, critic, and educator. He teaches creative writing at the University of Michigan, where he serves as the managing editor of the Michigan Quarterly Review, and on the MFA faculty at the Rainier Writing Workshop. Adam has previously worked as an editor at the Rumpus, the Chicago Review of Books, the Southeast Review, and Tri-Quarterly. He is also the editor of the anthology We Are All Armenian, Voices from the Diaspora. His writing has appeared in The Guardian, Runner's World, Lit Hub, Catapult, West Branch, Electric Literature, Gulf Coast, Boulevard, Joyland, Longreads, and many other publications. He holds an MFA in creative writing from Northwestern University and a PhD in creative writing from Florida State University. He lives in Michigan. His debut novel, which is fantastic, Waterline, is out now with Harper Via. Lastly, Chelsea Shannon is an editor and a writer based in New Orleans. For almost 10 years, she has worked at the University of New Orleans Press, helping to create books that chronicle New Orleans culture, among other topics. She holds an MFA from the UNO Creative Writing Workshop and makes zines. Chelsea, we're so glad that you have brought us Fearcatcher. I'm going to pass it to Vedran, who will read from the novel.
Thank you. When she saw the young, dark, round woman under the green and white awning, she noticed her arms first. lean, long, bare, but for a single golden bangle on her right hand that Tagui Maritrosian watched float up to her elbow, fall to her wrist, sliding on the skin like it was making music too, alongside the young woman's violin. The first thing Taguhi Matrosyan said to Ruzan after she had approached her was that she wasn't great. There's skill here, certainly talent, but no genius. You're not going to change anyone's mind with your music, let alone the world, but I can find you a job. I picked the violin as a child because it looked like me, Ruzan said, bringing it to her chest. What is your name? Tagui, the woman said, extending a hand. Let me take you home. I'm not what you think, Ruzan said. Tagui raised an eyebrow. What does it matter what I think? I'm telling you I'm going to help you and your child. She pointed at Ruzan's stomach. Do you want my help? Ruzan rested her violin against her rounding belly. That depends. Do you want anything from me in return? Gratitude, maybe. And what form does gratitude take for you? What had this young girl experienced? Just a word, just that word, nothing more. I promise you, nothing more. Ruzan had been on her own for only a week, 6 days since she had last seen the old woman. Today was the 7th day. Today there was a woman with a bright pink face and large, round green eyes extending a hand. Takui Matrosyan was dressed in pants. She was a tall woman, and if she were a man, she would become director at the conservatory. All of her students rose to their feet whenever she entered the classroom, and no one was ever late. Her piano class was one of 2 experimental teaching practices set in place that year at the conservatory. Experimental, that's what the director called it, but she knew it was because they didn't have enough faculty. Most of the city's musicians had left for more prestigious capitals, Moscow, Kiev, Riga. Other instructors taught one-on-one, but Tagui had to listen to 4 people play the piano terribly at the same time. She took the assignment because she was encouraged to, reminded that if she didn't, she would not be employed any longer. Her last lover was the former director, a handsome man with big hands, a conductor, but he had died at his desk a year prior and was replaced by a countertenor she could not love. Come with me, you must be so cold. I've managed. Tagui took hold of Ruzan's violin. That is no way to live. Then I'll skip a little bit, but we're still in the same chapter, to where they're almost, they're at her house, and so they're about to enter the home. Do you like dogs? Ruzan licked her lips. I had one, she said, her hold on her violin case tightening. Had? Had. Well, now you have 2. I don't really like playing with them. She paused. Or they don't like playing with me. The tall woman tilted her head to look at the girl. How old was she? Couldn't have been more than 20. Old enough to fall pregnant and so old enough to know the fundamental facts of life. Dogs don't play. All that running around, that turning in circles, all that noise, what do you think they're doing if not living? There's a lot you'll have to learn if you're to live with us. You have a husband? Tagui smiled, her lips tightening. She heard her teeth slide against each other, a sharp sound like fingernails on chalk. Do you? She pointed her chin at the young girl's stomach. The girl seemed to shrink in front of her, whereas her stomach bloomed. Tagui sighed. She was tired of being on the defensive, but it seemed others did not tire of putting her there, even her lovers, as if she was supposed to feel guilty, as if she was supposed to add to their pleasure the thrill of another man's woman. She cared for that the least. I do have a husband, she said. I do. I didn't mean to imply that I didn't. Will that be a problem? She considered her words. Are you uncomfortable around men? No, Ruzan said. But will he be uncomfortable around me? She touched her face, her left cheek, and then put out her hand to show the pale side of her palm. He's no barbarian, my husband. Come, Tagui said, watching the dark girl look intently at her own hands. Let me show you your new home. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vedran. I love the passage that you shared for a couple reasons. The line about what are dogs doing? Dogs don't play. What are they doing but living is one of the many that I've marked, and I feel really exemplifies the like light-handed but deep wisdom that is just throughout this novel in the mouths of various characters and the narrator. And I also love that you chose a passage that highlights Ruzan's violin. That is kind of one of her avatars that follows her throughout the story. And while I last reread Fearcatcher in April, and while I was reading it, I came across another quote about violins that I wanted to share. That's from The Life of Henri Boulard. I haven't read this, it was quoted in something else, but the quote is, "A novel is like a bow. The body of the violin, which gives the sounds, is the soul of the reader." And for me, it's the soul of Naira. Like it is of readers too, but I just feel what I imagine as Naira's soul just resonating through this novel like an instrument. So I wanted to share that on the note of violins.
Mhm.
And there is so much to say about the richness and depth and just like good storytelling in this work. And I think something that struck me on first read, which, as Olivia mentioned, at UNO Press, we published Naira's short stories first. So that was my first encounter with her fiction before receiving Fearcatcher. And I think after falling in love with the short fiction, I was especially excited to read a novel and a coming of age novel, which I feel like is one way for writers to kind of theorize on life as a whole. And given the scope of Ruzan's youth that it portrays, and also a seminal moment in Armenian history and nationhood, there's just a lot of burgeoning life here. And it also almost has the authority of a sacred text with the way that folklore and myths are also inserted throughout the story. And there's just a sense of, there's a monumental sense. So I guess I have to wonder how somebody in their 20s was able to create something that just feels so complete and such like a perfect reflection of life. So I guess I want to ask, like, what can you share about the origins of this work and like what was maybe some of the first sparks in Naira to tell this story or to see this character? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so I had to actually look back at some of the emails to sort of jog my memory. But so what initially she had done, so I'm not quite sure where the fear catcher came. I think it was like the idea of it, it was maybe from the family or in the sense of like she had heard it from somewhere. It wasn't something that was practiced or, you know. So her first idea was a short story that she wrote and published. A long time ago when we were still in our MFA. And I think that's where the spark started. So it was called The Fear Catcher of East Hollywood. So it's so taking sort of the idea of the fear catcher as it's represented in the novel, but putting it in a sort of contemporary American setting. And it was a very nice story. It's sort of like from the perspective of a young boy, and it's got this like beautiful ending. The problem is like I don't know how anybody can find it now, but so she was like she kind of abandoned it as a story, didn't include it in her short story collection, but the idea of the fear catcher sort of stuck with her. And I was surprised as I was looking through emails to remember that initially Fearcatcher had a sort of a two-part structure, so to speak. It sort of was set. One part of it was kind of very similar to what the novel ended up being, but a second part was actually set in LA,
Okay.
sort of going off that East Hollywood sort of Fearcatcher initial sort of short story idea. That was like something that I was like, oh yeah, but it was very much at the beginning, And I
Mm.
haven't really, again, I should have done more sleuthing, but I haven't figured out what exactly. I would probably think it was her that changed that with, she was already in talks with an agent at that point. And I think a little bit of sort of back and forth between her and the agent was sort of the idea of reconsidering the structure was probably put out there. And I think at some point she just kind of abandoned sort of that contemporary American setting, part of the setting, and sort of just wanted to concentrate on Armenia itself. And I do remember very distinctly that something that she was always sort of worried about is not having been to Armenia in a long time and sort of not having the sense of what life was like there. Obviously in the moment, she can't go back in time, but I thought like, well, I don't like nobody will know, that's why you have your imagination. So she did a wonderful job there. But yeah, I think so. Considering that that short story was relatively old, so in the MFA, it's been around this idea with her for a really long time. And I think if anybody reads Naira's nonfiction collection, Fear
Mm.
is such a like important concept in the sense of we write our obsessions to a certain degree, and I think she was obsessed with sort of and it was a way of dealing with it, with her fear, her fear of especially losing the people that she loved. So the idea of fear in its many different manifestations like was always part of her writing, and
Mm.
sort of the idea of a fear catcher, just this like beautiful idea, whether it works or not, was obviously something that it made a lot of sense that she would be attracted to it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it is also kind of an excavation or exploration of the relationship between love and fear, and like what does fear do? What can it be? Is it helpful? Is it not? Like there are a lot of like ideas in here as well, and I was appreciating that especially on this last reread. Um, and I guess on the note of Naira's imagination,
Mhm.
and whether it works or not, like what is this magic that's at the heart of this our main character, our story, everything, the whole emotional context of this book. We were talking before the call. If you Google Fearcatcher, like there's very little, few results are returned in English. And there is not a lot that you can kind of research about the context of this figure, this folk magic or mysticism or however you want to name it. And I guess again in this most recent read, I was thinking a bit about like, is a Fearcatcher a witch? Like, is she not? How well does that label fit? And thinking about how kind of witchiness and spirituality are pretty popular right now, I would say, in the US mainstream tastes. And yeah, so just kind of thinking about that concept with this book. And also I have to talk about the ambiguity of the way Naira portrays the act itself. Sometimes it appears almost like a massage therapy session. Sometimes it looks like sex. In one instance, it almost looks like an abortion, although it is not. Like, it's a lot of really brilliant, just like what exactly is happening here. So I guess what I want to ask is how much of this imagination of what Ruzan's mother does is based on Naira's own imaginings. Also, the myth of the first fear catcher we get early on in the novel, who's trapped in the bridge. Like, did she make that up? Is that something that she heard or read before? Like,
I
mhm.
mean, I'm gonna have to disappoint you on that. But it's just like I just like can't remember, and I feel like also to a degree, I feel like it's like this is sort of for me the foundational text of peer catching,
Yeah.
So almost like a part of me was like can see it either way. Like, did she like I don't remember any books, okay?
Uh-huh.
So I don't remember like I feel like in the family circle there was sort of an idea that there was a fear catcher, and I might be getting this wrong too, but I just I just feel like there's too much detail to have found a book like that, So I'm always looking like if it's almost like I would reference the novel again to be like, well, this is how it started. This was the first Fearcatcher book. I have no idea,
Yes.
because and that's what I love, so sort of answer your question not through sort of through the lens of her writing is um I just love how it feels like this is sort of, let's say, researched, it really feels like ooh, we got a really good detail from like a nonfiction book, and you as a writer, or any of us as a writers, are like, oh, that's gonna be perfect, when real life gives you that perfect detail, that you can build on.
Yeah.
And it is very likely that she just provided that foundational detail herself, because again, like stone and all that, like, sort of her idea of Armenia, it's one of the like main motifs or images is stone, stone churches made out of stone, and just the way she uses. Again, I've never been to Armenia, so my idea of Armenia comes through her writing. But it's just I just think a lot of like very mountainous, so when I think of the Fearcatcher, and any of my knowledge is based on both knowledge of its actual act, which is, kind of, and I love that you brought up the ambiguity of it, and so its actual act, and also the way sort of its like mythical origin, they're all for me connected to the novel, and I feel like the novel satisfies that kind of like wanting to know more, for at least for the moment, because I can't find any more, right? And I just love that it kind of creates this world for me where I think the best novels can do that, where even novels that are based on an obvious history, that when I finish it, there's a curiosity to go and find out more, but I also feel at that moment like fulfilled, that I feel like I have known this world, and
Yeah.
there's nothing like left for me to sort of figure out on my own, which is, one of the beauty of fiction, the sort of full realization of another world, however close or distant it is from our, own lives. So I feel like she achieved that wonderfully. And so as a guide to fear catching, I'll be like, just read this book, but I would never say like that it's true or based on, whatever truth means, it's ambiguity on top of ambiguity.
Yes, I love that. And honestly, it's very badass to just like go forth and be like, I'm gonna populate and imagine and reify this magic, and like this is what it looks like and this is how it moves. And I agree, I just fully believed it, and I'm like, surely this is something she knew intimately and like inherited versus created, and perhaps that is true on a less tangible level in some way. But yeah, that's really incredible to think about. And also the fact that she basically also tunes it, or like tools the technology of fear catching to serve feminism. Like it's a way to cope with patriarchy, it's a way to cope with trauma. Like there's a lot of depth, like complexity to the way that she is not just presenting, but apparently creating this magic. So that's really nice to hear. Thank you. Um, I think it's time we pass it to Aram to lead us deeper into discussion.
Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to talk about this book. And I should say, like, I feel very overwhelmed and honored to be here, just as a fan of Naira's work. And um, she's been very important to my own literary journey in a lot of ways. I mean, I remember distinctly. I came home to my parents' house like when I was still in my MFA, for Christmas, and picked up all these old literary journals that like I had, like was having sent to, because that was the closest thing I had to a permanent address as a student, was like at my parents' house. Um, I picked up this issue of Michigan Quarterly Review and found the essay. I first was familiar with Naira's nonfiction, Hava Nagila, this beautiful, beautiful essay, that immediately just blew me away. And I was fully in love with it and was like, I need to know more about this writer. And then found out that she had recently passed away, and just felt this immediate sense of loss, and had to go like read everything I could find online. and was fortunate enough to republish Hava Nagila in We Are All Armenian, this anthology that I put out. Um, and then, as things move on, things kind of come full circle, or, life's time keeps moving forward. And I feel very lucky to have blurbed Fearcatcher and now be like a part of this book being out in the world. And I think it's just absolutely tremendous. I want to start. I'm not going to read extended, but I just want to read one paragraph from the beginning of chapter 2, which is page 21 for anyone who has the book in front of them. Before the Fearcatcher's husband found Ruzan in the forest and fell in love, bringing her under the cover of night and her own skin into the blue home where his wife did her infamous work, Kmitayan Street was full of one-story stone houses. The houses were all painted a different color, and most were in multiple shades, the shifts from brown to yellow, not gradual but sudden, so that visitors to the small town had to blink twice to understand that it was no trick of the afternoon sun. While the Satoyevan residents had the foresight to plan ahead the color scheme of their homes, a half bucket of blue saved for the window shades, a pickle jar of white for the wooden door, their houses were made from stone, which meant the paint did not and could not keep long. Residents were perpetually painting and repainting their homes. And I love that paragraph for so many reasons. And like I said, I think we have a ton to talk about in the novel, but one of the first things I want to talk about is Naira's prose. And like just the way there's this, on a sentence level, just this level of confidence and precision and I think I had said this when we were talking beforehand, is like it's so hard to carry for 400 pages. I mean, to have sentences like that that are both definitive, but feel original in their syntax and their rhythm, while also, to use a cliche term, feel kind of timeless, I think is really, really difficult. And so I'd be curious to hear from both of you, like what really draws you to Naira's writing, just as like a thing of its own, without thinking, because the storytelling is phenomenal. The use of metaphor and figurative language is phenomenal. This ability to I think structure and reinforce and really like build the architecture of good fiction is phenomenal. But then when we're looking at the writing on its own, it's just still really so splendid. And so I'd love to hear from both of you what stands out.
You want to go ahead, Chelsea?
Sure. So I first experienced this with the short story collection, and I guess the best way for me to put it is like Naira, whenever I read Naira, it makes me cry. Like at some point I'm gonna cry because it's so beautiful and also because it offers me succor and relief in a way that like a small number of other writers do, in the sense that like I feel that this person, this artist, like construction of consciousness really resonates with me. I feel seen, I feel held. It's like a deep sense of being able to like lean against the work. There's like an inner strength to it and to the prose. And I guess I just really trust this voice, whether it's a character or a narrator or whomever. It's just so lush. Yeah, it's hard to, I feel like I'm effusing, but that's what it comes down to if we're talking about her language. And yeah, the sustained quality of it is also highly impressive. It's not like there's an evocative passage and then we kind of lapse back. It's like it's all very evocative, almost to the point that like I have to like gear shift a bit to be like, okay, here comes the beauty.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I definitely, relate to what Chelsea is saying and how I feel towards it. I feel like in this novel, especially, having had the just amazing, unbelievable privilege of meeting Naira at a point of, when she was really getting into her work still early on, and already like really, really
just a little more there than I think I would want to say most of us, you know. Just a little like she knew what she wanted, and she got there, you know, quicker. And she was the youngest one of us all at the MFA. But I felt, you know, obviously as with any writer, there was a sort of development, and you know, and it's just like blows my mind. Like, yeah, the sustained quality is unbelievable. And I think there was always in her nonfiction, sorry, in her like short fiction as well, there was this idea like realism. You know, realism is very important, but there's sort of the undergirding of like myth, of like fable, and I feel like she really brought those together, not only in the sense of storytelling, in the setting and the themes of the novel, but I think also in the writing itself, in the prose, where we have moments of just very, very, very realistic writing, in the sense of like, I think mostly in the dialogue, and that's, you know, why I picked, you know, I love her dialogue. It just sounds like, you know, in that sort of, you know, way that we say, it sounds like what people actually talk like, but in a sort of stylized way, because, you know. So, but at the same time, like, this is such a beautiful paragraph that Aram read. It's just, there's a kind of fable brightness to it, you know. I mean, obviously it's about the sun and stuff, but it just feels like a place that goes into like, progresses from like, obviously it's made up, then it becomes real in the sense that settings become real in fiction, but then it sort of transcends that and becomes unreal again, you know. It's like a dream place. So I feel like, you know, what we often try to teach students, like it's not enough like you're writing about Chicago, you know, and let's say most people know Chicago. It's, you know, you want Chicago to be present as a city that people who've been there can recognize, but you also want to capture it in a way where certain details come through that you see Chicago anew. It becomes almost like a fable place. And it doesn't have to be an old Armenian village. It can be New York City, it can be Chicago. Well, every setting, and Naira was definitely a writer of setting, of place, you know, can become sort of a setting in a fable, you know, a kind of like a fairy tale place, if you write it. And that's the way sort of in, you know, sort of to create the sense of sort of like, what's that word? It sort of re-seeing it again, sort of refamiliarizing yourself by sort of making it different. And I think she does that so well. And I think she does it even in Yerevan, which feels a lot more like, oh, this is like a city as it is. So I really love the sort of the ease of mixing sort of a writing that you can almost feel like it's sort of fairy tale-ish in its sort of evocative beauty, and sort of the more realistic details that sort of make it feel like this is a place that could actually exist. And I think throughout there's this ease of formal play where sort of like you know, like details serve both the sense of familiarizing and defamiliarizing us to the reality of whatever place she's writing about.
Yeah, I love that idea of making something real and then kind of making it unreal again. In part because I think so much contemporary literary fiction that plays with myth, that plays with fable, or plays with folklore, almost really intentionally kind of draws, or it really intentionally draws attention to itself in the way it does that. And, you know, makes a point of being like, oh, I'm playing with this tradition. And I think one of the things that make Naira's writing really special is that you can feel that folkloric quality or that fable quality without it feeling like the writer is trying to make that point to you. That, you know, the author is still has this distance on the page that actually makes it that much more profound. Because and Chelsea, you'd kind of pointed to it earlier in the conversation, is this idea of like, we totally buy into this Fearcatcher mythology because it's so well executed on the page, it's so well thought out. Those details that maybe feel like research are actually just really confident writing, and really confidently kind of taking something that is beyond the scope of day to day, or that feels quotidian in a sense, and amplifying it without necessarily having a flourish that reminds us that sort of fable like level exists. And one of the other reasons I picked this paragraph as a place to start, among many, is thinking about Vedran, as you said, setting, and this idea of these homes that you have this community where they're trying to build second stories onto their homes. They're like, all right, this is how we kind of level up. And that image is so stunning. But then, as you said, thinking about small town, rural countryside, and then going to Yerevan, and it's one of the first things that Ruzan notices when going to the big city is like, oh, these buildings are close together, but they're tall. They're real buildings. They're made of granite. They're made of stone. The materials are actually mentioned pretty explicitly in thinking about this idea of how things are put together and what those different settings look like. And so Vedran, I'll go back to you because I know I feel like you have a little bit more of a sense of this than I do, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot since you initially brought it up.
Yeah, sorry, I want to pipe into just on the note of kind of blending realism and fable or myth. Um, I feel like it's an almost godlike or ancient-like voice that we're getting. And that's what I was trying to say in the middle is like, or in the beginning, is how could somebody so young create something of such authority and such a monumental vibe? Um, but I had something else to say. Like, hold on. Um, I don't know. I lost it. It's okay.
Um, well, yeah, that happened to me too. And I was just like, I had to like, then the word came to me. So what I thought a lot, and in my head it connects. And I don't think this is how it connected in Naira's head. She obviously was aware of like Russian formalism in the sense of estrangement, which is like Viktor, I had to look him up, Shkolovsky's sort of term for sort of making something strange. In the US, we can, like the poets said, make it new, So I think that sense of like estranging us from a setting, again, that's why, I said like Chicago, you got to estrange us from Chicago so that we can see it again, because otherwise, especially when you're writing about a place like Chicago, and that's something that on another level, people say like, well, what's the point of description anyways, especially of something that most people know. Well, yeah, but the problem is like everybody knows everything. If you think like, nobody needs to go to a little Armenian village to have an idea of what a little Armenian village looks like, but that's why you have to take sort of our sort of stereotypical or cliched view of any place and sort of rearrange it so that we see it anew. And I think the way she does it, again, going off the Russian, like the great Russian authors, and sort of echoing what Chelsea was talking about, is the sense of that it feels old, and when I read the Russian writers, I don't read them for their prose because they're translated, but yet it feels modern because there's such precision, and it seems like somebody has been laboring over each sentence, over each word choice. So I feel like it has that sort of old sort of classical quality, which is something I always told Naira when she was writing this book, and when I would read the draft, and I would be like, wow, this feels like a novel in translation if the translator was an unbelievable prose writer, like, or she translated, so I just love that sense of inclusivity, and I think it's inclusive in the sense of setting, theme, blah blah blah, but it's also stylistically and tonally inclusive, and I think that's what sort of creates the world. And Naira does, and I think it is honestly just confidence, and reading a lot. Naira does such an easy job, or makes it look effortless, the way she just shifts tonally, shifts stylistically, throughout the novel. And I feel like this gives us a sense of a novel that feels both like very old, but also has sort of a modernist, sort of contemporary intimacy and knowledge with sort of different kind of genres and different kind of approaches to writing and style, and that marriage between the two is, I think, done very, sort of almost like with a magic, with like a bit of sleight of hand, where you don't really notice any fissures, like it's all very seamless into one another. So suddenly you're like going from one place to another, or from one thought, from one character thinking to another, and at the same way you're also shifting from one sort of style of prose to a different one, but you never feel sort of like that you're crossing over a border. It's all sort of just one whole continent, and you're just kind of traveling through. And I really love that. And I think it's only these things that I notice is like when asked to talk about it, which I love, which is the best. You should read a book and be lost in it, and then read it a second time to really study it. And I think that's what she delivers. And it's only on second read or third read that I can see, that I can talk about the craft of it, because in the first read, there's nothing really to pick up on, because it's just, I just read through it, and I'm just like in this world.
Yeah. I love that idea of the novel as a continent too, because I think most, and I say this as a fiction writer myself, I feel like most of us, we get a novel and we're like, this is a state or a province or maybe a country, but like this feels much larger. This has that quality of scope to it. I mean, both in terms of length, like it is a longer novel, but also, as you're saying, in terms of stylistic cohesion, in terms of really covering a lot of ground. I was really, when I was reading through this again, on page 94, the first sentence of chapter 12, the lessons began, as with most lessons in small towns like this, with a walk around town. I was kind of like, that's a really great first sentence for a novel, but it's coming 100 pages in. And there's something about that, every chapter has really confident entry points, has really confident closes, and all ties together, is all woven so well. And now I'm sort of, oh yes, I remember the question I was going to ask now, which is thinking about scope, and the two of you might have a better sense of this than I do. And Vedran, you had mentioned this already, that the early drafts kind of had a different structure to it, that there was this part in LA. But do either of you kind of know, like, or how much work went into the narrative arc of this novel and how it eventually ended up in this form? Because it's such a pleasure to read in terms of how it starts and how it maintains that momentum, and how, there's these mini arcs of up and down, and then where it finishes. That sense of structural integrity is really prominent through the whole thing.
Well, I mean, again, it's like, seeing the drafts and stuff, sort of gives me sort of a better idea, but, it's still not seeing into Naira's head. But I think, I feel like that, and that's something also that kind of blew me away, because it's like Naira was for so long a short story writer, and she seemed to write sort of just, she would get a little bit of head in her head, and then kind of write and catch up, and then kind of keep going. There wasn't any sense of like outlines, like those like outlines, or like everything known ahead of time was like an alien concept to both of us, and because we wanted to be surprised ourselves, so with the novel, and that's what makes it so amazing from sort of a more personal standpoint of like, how did you do this for 400 pages plus without really having sort of a full overall structure? Now, she did obviously have a little bit more of more detailed, sort of sense of where it would go, and she needed to, because, she was talking to an agent, and they don't just be like, oh yeah, sure, you figure it out, you're a genius, so she needed to have a little bit of more like concrete sort of plot points. But still, a lot of it just would change. A lot of it would be fleshed out through the imagination. But I can say, and because it's been there throughout the draft, and I remember her talking about it, the ending was always sort of what it had to be. So she had a place to reach. What it would look like, she didn't know, but it was almost like we were both confident. I think she was confident, and I was confident from just knowing her that ending, that that bus ride, and her coming into town, and the description of that. I feel like you're gonna take on an earthquake. I'm like, how are you gonna do that, right? And again, it's that same method that she uses. It's the earthquake and the sort of passage leading up to the consequences of the earthquake feels both like sort of epic in the sense of like a blockbuster movie where there's like this big thing, but also very lived. Like with the funny thing, the bus breaking down and all the people on the bus were just like characters. So again, it's that sort of estrangement that she does from our sort of idea of like a big finale with something catastrophic, literally catastrophic happening in it. So she always had the idea, okay, it's going to be an earthquake, it's going to be a return home, and, fear catching in the moment of a sort of national emergency, it just came together, right? That has to be the ending. So she knew where she was going, how she was going to pull that off. I feel like she didn't know until she wrote it, and that's just kind of was her mode of operation, and obviously it works wonderfully.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Chelsea. Sorry.
I'm just thinking about the image of the mountain, and the traditional plot diagram is da 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 da, and like you could argue it does that, but it feels more like it's building. We have our foundation, we have Ruzan's childhood, we have the village, etc. And then we're building up, the tension increases, the straits get more dire, and then we're just working up to this mountain that is truly, it is epic, and it's highly exciting, and it's also like a crisis point that I think, I don't know, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations about contemporary fiction, but like it just feels, again, to use monumental, mountainous, like it feels huge and cataclysmic in a way that I don't encounter all that much in contemporary fiction myself, or like what I choose. And then also on that note, I remembered what I was trying to say before. Vedran, you basically said it, but just the choice of an omniscient narrator is also like not trendy, not what you're geared toward in most MFA programs, and it is highly competent to be like, and also like serves the story and suits it perfectly to have this like omniscient vantage. And here we are leaping into a neighbor's head, a school friend's head, the dog's head. I love Jolie's little chapter,
Love
you
it.
know, and then, but also at the end here, we have, a geological event, a crisis, a catastrophe that surely this God voice knows is coming, but like that we're left out of until we get the end, in order to have that tension. So I agree. The structuring is really brilliant.
Yeah.
Can I just?
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I
Let me
need to
just.
step back.
No, I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to add because just add a little extra to it in the sense of like I mean Aram had said we can cover most of what we want to say in 25 minutes, and I feel like we couldn't even cover in 50 minutes just the choice of the omniscient narrator, and not so much even the choice, but the sort of the rendering of it. And I just love like again the ease, and sort of like this narrator is on the edge of being a character again, like not to stress this point, this is more my reading, but like in the Russian, novels where it feels like somebody's telling you a story that they heard, but it is also godlike. And then again, it's that easy mixture where nothing feels drastic. Because, I mean, as writers, as readers, we know that sort of a wrong move in the point, in the choice of narration, or a sort of overly manipulative withholding of information from a supposedly godlike narrator can get you out of the novel. And I mean, there's these drastic shifts in sort of perspective and sort of entering a character's mind, and yet they're so done with ease, they never throw me off. And I love how sometimes sometimes the the omniscient narrator comes a little closer, almost kind of whispering, almost like a friend, a co-reader, and sometimes very far away, very, as Chelsea said, very godly, very knowledgeable, and not wanting you to know, and just kind of letting you suffer the mystery and the excitement of it. So I just, it's amazing. Not to say like I know how she did that, because obviously I don't, but it's like amazing to witness it on the page. And I do think it is very risky to be that, she's subtle obviously, but to be that playful with the omniscient narration, and yet to be also so like bold-faced and epic about it as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny. But I was gonna say we see this as teachers and editors. Like one of the things I tell students and writers that I'm working with is like endings are really hard. Point of view is really hard. Like those variations in psychic distance are really difficult and require a lot of attention to detail. And then like those are the things we're talking about that in this case are like, you know, stellar, excellent. And so to be talking about what are often the most difficult parts of a work of fiction being executed so well on this many levels, I think is just really special and is exciting. I am being mindful of time and going to remind our folks listening in that you can drop questions in the chat. So please do so. Feel free to ask us stuff and we'll get to it if we can. We do have one question there from Nancy already, which is, can you speak to how the novel found its way to publication? And what were the challenges and poignancies and or magic along the way?
Well, I can get it up to the point where Chelsea, you know, fell in love with it, and you know, it's you know, I'll make it short because it's, you know, it's not good. It's not a good story. Because you know, like she had an agent. Everything was looking really good. The novel was coming about. She was working with an agent closely as she was you know, finishing it, going through drafts. It was getting better and better. And, you know, the agent sent it out to a bunch of publishers and, you know, it was just rejected, right? You know, for like, you know, again, reasons that I feel like, you know, I mean, obviously everything's connected with selling, you know, it's not really the editor's personal feelings. It's more like their idea of like how that could sell or not. And so, some of the things we got, and this is something you know, I'm always like interested to hear from Chelsea about is one of the things, and you know, nobody mentioned the point of view, but but I feel like, you know, it's risky, I think, and I think Chelsea is right to say it's like we don't see it a lot because I don't think it's part of the kind of novels that become big, you know, because I mean, honestly, forget 400 pages, it is a kind of a difficult novel. It's easy to read in one sense because Naira is a master storyteller, but she didn't particularly, you know, have any instance of making it easy on the reader or really making it difficult. That's just the way she had to tell her story. You know, she never really thought of that. I can almost confidently say she never thought like, let me make this a little harder or let me make this a little easier. You know, it's just like, let me make it what it has to be. And I think a lot of things that we got as sort of a shorthand answer for why the novel will not be published is sort of the protagonist, right? Which is, again, sort of the, you know, there's like so many cliches about writing, but there's just as many cliches about reading, which is unfortunate. And I think readers are always sort of being thought of as, I mean, honestly, as dumber than we are, you know? We know how to read. You know, we know subtleties, but so, you know, it was almost this idea like that she sort of wasn't as sort of welcoming to readers as she could have been, you know. And I always think, you know, when I hear Chelsea talking about it, you know, she loves, loves as a character, like Ruzan. She connects with Ruzan, if we want to say all of these like selling points for a novel. And I feel like I do too, easily. And it's the complexity that also kind of, yes, obviously keeps me a little bit of a distance, you know, but that's what makes her interesting, you know, like a character that you like love the way you love your sister or brother. It's like, you know, it's like we need some of that tension, right? we need some of that friction in Ruzan, right? And there's a kind of stoicness that is a very Naira character thing. But I think that all really works. So in the sense, it just, that was one of the reasons given as sort of like why it could not reach a larger audience. So in sort of like use that as sort of to let Chelsea talk about sort of what sort of talk spoke to her about the novel, because I just kind of sent it out at that point, being sort of like sorry, no, I sent out the short story collection at that point, been desperate, and in the University of New Orleans, which they have been great, Chelsea and Abram. They took on the short story collection, and then and I was very happy. But then I had this novel, which I thought the short story collection was amazing, but the novel was amazing, and I didn't know what to do. And Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you reached out first or if I nudged you, but maybe you reached out. But you were like, I think you reached out, and you were like, was there more writing? And I remember, where I was when she did that. I was feeling down again about sort of the world and everything. And then, she made my day, she made my decade, and I was like, yeah, there's more writing. There's this novel, and I sent it to Chelsea, thinking that at least she would get a fair reading, because Chelsea, really appreciated in all the right ways the short story collection. But this was, a different animal. But the way Chelsea sort of wrote her initial sort of reaction to the book was just like, yeah, I mean, you have your dream readers, and sometimes you get to meet them.
That's really sweet. I mean, yeah, it took like no thinking on my part. Like, we need this book. The world needs this book. This is like high art. Like, this is very, very fine writing. And I guess what I said earlier about being able to lean on it, and then also what you were saying, Vedran, about like the consciousness, like the closeness to psyche and like inner mental machinations, the way that Naira portrays those. It reminds me a lot of like Virginia Woolf, Nell Larson, Toni Morrison, with like the closeness of like just tracking how consciousness works. And that to me really stood out and really impressed me. I was primed to be impressed, but then the depth and scope of this novel just allowed her to go that much farther into the minds of everybody, and just showing her prowess and what I perceive as her understanding of human nature. And yeah, I was more than delighted to publish, and it's been so great talking about it today.
Yeah. Not to get on the soapbox for a minute, but this is also one of the reasons I think we should all be really grateful for university and indie presses and small presses, that big publishers and agents, they have to sell books, and so many of those books, sure, they sell, but and they're read quickly and forgotten quickly, but this to me feels like a book that's going to be around for a really long time, and it already feels as if it has been around for a really long time. And so there's something really special about that. We are just a little bit over time. Vedran, I'm going to let you answer this one quickly before we turn it back to Olivia. We have a question that says, reading Naira's drafts and being so close to the work as it developed, can you give us a sense of what that was like? Imagine she read your drafts as you developed your own work too.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like a privilege to be in a relationship, I feel like, with another writer. I mean, first you have to love the person, but like it's this idea of like, when Naira and I would hear about other couples who are writers who like they don't show each other drafts, they only show each other the finished product, and we were like, you're missing out, like this is so much fun to see this person work, because it's like the thing about Naira, and something that I sort of did as well, we didn't really like to talk about writing, so this was almost, or we would talk about it in a sort of like oblique way, so this was kind of a way, reading through the drafts and getting or actually when we did talk about it, it was very it was either very oblique or very concrete, like this is what I'm doing. It was like, craft level things. It wasn't so much about the state of writing, which we weren't happy about. But so reading these drafts and just seeing her like these changes and, sort of trying to help in ways that I could, but also, just mostly kind of limiting myself to the prose because she was already so ambitious to a level where I'm like, all right, you're already over there. I can't write it. I can't draw you a map, you need to draw me one. So just watching her sort of expand upon this, coming up with this small idea and then just it blows up, was remarkable. And I always think one of my biggest memories is just, sometimes like taking a step back and we would sit next to each other and write. And sometimes I would just look over and sort of see Naira writing. And it was kind of like, and then kind of like this very thoughtful pause. And then almost like a click and then, and I'm just like, it sometimes felt like she was reading a novel that was already written and she was just sort of transcribing it. It was amazing, and it remains a bit of a mystery. And even if I had access into her brain, I feel like I would probably decline because that mystery is part of her genius. And I don't want to solve it. I don't want to know.
Well, I think that's a great note to leave off on. Olivia, we'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Adam, Vedran, Chelsea, for this conversation. It's an honor to include Fearcatcher in our series. Thank you again to our series co-sponsors, Nasser and the Zohrab Center, and thank you to the University of New Orleans Press for co-sponsoring this event. I sincerely hope you all read this masterful novel. Buy the book, gift the book, ask the library to add it to their collection, have your book club read the book. It's just been a real pleasure to talk about it today. I feel like we could talk for a long time. On another note, as it's Pride Month, I wanted to also encourage you to read Naira's short story collection, which includes the story Miles to Exit, about the relationship between a grandfather and his adolescent grandson, and looks at the idea of masculinity in the Armenian immigrant community. Please visit Yala's website to learn more about our programming. Applications for our 4 annual grants will open in September. And if you'd like to apply to translate one of Adam's or Naira's books into Armenian, please check out the English translation grant. Our Literary Light series and our inaugural Sarkisian Workshop series will return in September. Thank you all so much for being here to celebrate this luminous writer, Naira Kuzmich.